Nigel Farage's emergency address did not go the way he had planned. He had called for cold rage. He got cold rage on the streets of Southampton, directed at the police stations, while the Novak family, who had asked for none of it, started receiving hate online. He then recorded a follow-up video to explain that actually he'd been right all along. And Keir Starmer also stood up at PMQs and said something that doesn't happen very often in British politics. We'll get to that. So let's start with the follow-up video, because it tells you more about Farage than the original speech did.
When I spoke out yesterday morning about the appalling murder of Henry Novak and the way in which he was treated by the police, the point that I was trying to make is the police forces themselves have become so obsessed with DEI and with not treating everybody equally, namely treating people differently if they're white as opposed to minority ethnic groups. Well, one thing I did achieve was to break the wall of silence, because we did not have senior political figures speaking up in outrage about what had happened. And my stuff on social media was watched by tens of millions of people. But it would seem that politicians and mainstream media haven't quite got the message. So let's be clear. The police anti-racism commitment produced by the College of Policing and the National Police Chiefs Council makes it very clear in this document that when they're dealing with policing issues, it does not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind. Namely, the police act differently with different ethnic groups. And, you know, it was Hampshire Police we were talking about. Well, here it is. The Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary Race Action Plan, brought in whilst Priti Patel was Home Secretary. The police are being told you must deal with ethnic minorities in a preferential way over white people.
Farage is holding up a document, the College of Policing Anti-Racism Commitment, and is presenting it as a smoking gun, proof that police are institutionally trained to value white lives less. There's just one problem with that. The National Police Race Action Plan was launched in May of 2022. Priti Patel was the Home Secretary. The Conservative government's own Home Secretary commissioned the framework that Farage is now calling a left-wing woke conspiracy. Every single chief constable in England and Wales signed up to it, under the Conservatives, while Reform's own political allies were in power. And what does that document actually say? It says police should address racial disparities in how they use their powers, stop and search, use of force, tasers, because the evidence shows black people are more disproportionately on the receiving end of all of them. It's a response to decades of over-policing of black communities. Farage is reading it and telling you it means the opposite of what it says.
Now, I've actually had so many emails coming in from serving and ex-police officers about the indoctrination that they're currently receiving. And I want to read out just one. This man has served with the police force for a very, very long time. He says to me, I've been recently made to take compulsory race training, where I was told of my white privilege and that I work in an institutionally racist organisation. I was made to learn about black and South Asian history. Equity and preaching speeches from activist speakers filled the next 2-hour training session. They are making police terrified of applying the law equally.
So the first video ran on an anonymous email forwarded by Alison Pearson. The follow-up runs on another anonymous email, this time read out directly on camera. 2 unnamed people who contacted Nigel Farage. That's his entire evidential basis for his claim that British policing is systematically rigged against white people. You'd think the man presenting himself as the voice of truth against a conspiracy of silence would have something more substantial than a possible made-up email from his inbox.
Now, last night, thousands of people gathered outside the police station in Southampton. And you will get political commentators saying that I've stirred up this problem. Well, of course, they always do that. They don't want to address the issue. But I will make this prediction. If we don't end two-tier policing in this country, we will turn millions of ordinary, law-abiding citizens against the police and against the authorities in this country. I want us to stop and dampen down anger and strife on our streets.
He wants to dampen down anger. The man who told millions of people to respond with cold rage and spent the last 10-minute video on the previous morning building a case that white lives are officially worth less than black lives in Britain, who then doubled down with a second video. And he wants to dampen down anger. Meanwhile, the Novak family, who have asked for dignity and focus on knife crime, were receiving online abuse. The family who had called for calm, those are the consequences of cold rage. Farage lit the match and is now telling you he wants to put the fire out. It also went on PMQs, and that's where things got a little bit uncomfortable.
Following the horrendous circumstances of Henry Novak's death, can I urge the Prime Minister to consider this? It is now clear to growing millions in this country that we're living under two-tier policing. The instructions that are given to police officers from police bosses are clear and written down in ink. It says you must treat different ethnic groups in different ways. That, apart from the upset and the anger at the circumstances of his death, the anger that you saw spilling out in Southampton last night, and which is in danger,
condemn the violence,
which is in danger of getting considerably worse, because if the public lose trust,
condemn it.
if the public lose trust in being treated fairly by the police, can he take some action, end this divisive practice of two-tier policing, and make sure that all British citizens are treated the same?
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe there's two-tier policing in this country. I'm really shocked that he pretends to have respect for Henry's family and then acts in this way. They are a grieving family.
Mr. Blash, please, it's a very important question. I want to hear the Prime Minister. If you want to carry on, go outside, please, Prime Minister.
Grieving family have asked us not to respond in the way that the Leader of Reform has responded. They've asked us not to. They have lost their son in the most appalling circumstance. They make a simple plea of us as human beings to please not exploit that. That is their plea to us. And we all need to reflect on those words of Henry's father. My response, and the response of others, to be fair, has been focused on the lessons to be learned, so we can deliver justice. His response has been to appeal for rage. Rage. That's his response to a father who's lost his son, and ask for that not to happen. Exploiting this tragedy to create grievance and division would be wrong in any circumstances, but to do it when the family are expressly saying, please don't, is unforgivable. It shows exactly who he is.
The Prime Minister at the dispatch box saying that a sitting MP's behaviour is unforgivable. That's not routine parliamentary language. But then I suppose, what do you expect? Farage is exploiting a family's grief against their explicit wishes. That shows exactly what kind of person that he is. Farage had no answer to that. In fact, he actually laughed. Here, let me just play that little clip there again for you.
He pretends to have respect for Henry's family and then acts in this way.
See, it's all just a big joke to him. But he wasn't the only one without an answer this week. On Cross Question with Ian Dale, Reform councillor had been defending Farage's speech. He'd made the case that Farage was right to speak out, right to write to the Attorney General, right to push the case for justice. And then Ian Dunt said something very simple.
You can criticise Nigel all you like, but Nigel has written to the Attorney General under the unduly lenient sentence scheme to say, come on, look at this again.
Nigel Farage really doesn't have a position making any comment on this until he apologises for what he did this morning. We should be clear as well that it's a pattern of behaviour from him. Do you remember Southport? Remember before the riots? The statement that Nigel Farage released then, something's being kept from us, it's all very fishy. Again, just stoking the worst sentiments, spreading division, encouraging the most aggressive, vitriolic response, and then out he is again today. Doesn't matter what the dad says, Doesn't matter what the family wants. Out he is again today, just exploiting it for his political gain. So when he's apologised for that fact, he can come and talk to us about what he said to the Attorney General.
Should I come back on that?
Don't have anything to say about that.
All right.
Brilliant. He just mumbles and shakes his head. Nothing. Because there is no answer. You can't claim to speak for a family while doing the one thing that the family is publicly, on the record, asked you not to do. The Reform Council knew it. The headshake told you everything. And then there's GB News, Reform's own propaganda TV channel. Christopher Hope is GB News political editor, not some left-wing commentator or just, a general Farage critic. In fact, he's actually quite chummy with him. So for him then to go after Lee Anderson, it makes for quite a refreshing change.
Well, what were you expecting? I mean, the Prime Minister issued a statement the day of the sentencing. He then gave an interview to journalists yesterday. He then spoke with real somber moments in the House of Commons, saying he was sick, he'd watched the video. What he's trying to do, and what leaders try and do, is calm it all down. That's why Kevin Badenoch asked 6 questions about benefits, not about...
It was very quick, though, Chopper, weren't it, to take the knee 6 years ago to a career criminal living 4,500 miles away.
About uniting.
That's not leadership, that's cowardice, Chopper.
Leadership,
that is cowardice.
If you want to be the next government, you've got to unite the country somehow. Yeah. And I don't think you are uniting it.
That's rubbish, Chopper. We are speaking on behalf of the country. Get out there in the real world and speak to people in the places like Ashford where I represent. They're absolutely furious. They agree with me, not with you.
Of course, but the problem is the guidance being given to police officers. They're following it. The guidance appears to be...
When does common sense kick in, Chopper? When does common sense kick in?
Police should be allowed to use that. If police are more worried about being seen as racist than applying common sense...
You turn up to a scene and a young man there is dying.
It's not the
use some
fault.
common sense.
Just as finally, on the father, Mark Novak, saying he doesn't want this to be a political issue, a divisive issue, and you're making it...
No, Chopper, look, it was mentioned in the Commons today numerous times by people of all political parties...
Saying come together.
That makes it political.
Saying come together.
That makes it political.
They weren't
the people out there are furious. They're furious in Ashfield, all around the country. They're furious about this. And if politicians don't speak out, well, then what are we here for?
Chris? Well, you say that, but Mark Novak said he doesn't want to be a divisive issue. Nigel Farage made it one.
No, he hasn't.
Yes, he did.
No, he hasn't.
Two-tier policing in the House of Commons is making it so.
Two-tier
everyone else said we're going to try and unite, pull together, bring the communities together. How is this helping the family of
If
Henry
we
Novak?
don't admit in this country that there's two-tier policing, we'll never solve the problem.
So here's what this week has actually shown. The original speech was a technique using a real tragedy as a vehicle for a pre-existing agenda. The follow-up video was damage control dressed as vindication. The PMQs appearance was an attempt to legitimise the argument in the Commons chamber. And across all of it, from his own side's political editor to a Reform councillor on a debate show to the Prime Minister at the dispatch box, the same charge kept landing and going unanswered. You ignored what the family asked for. Mark Novak stood outside Southampton Crown Court and said that this is not a case about racism. It is a case about murder. He said that he does not want his son's death used to create division, hatred and tension. He said the family holds Vikram Digworth solely and 100% responsible. Farage spent this past few days going and doing exactly the opposite of every single one of those things. He knows what cold rage does. He watched it happen in 2024. He's watching it happen again now, and he's still at it. The Novak family's still fighting for that full and fearless, transparent inquiry, and that's what deserves your attention. The family's grief will last a lifetime. Farage is doing his best to turn this into all about him. And when he's found that this story won't serve his purpose anymore, he'll drop it and move on to the next one. If you enjoy this kind of breakdown, please do subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and if you can and afford it, then the memberships are open.
Exploiting this tragedy to create grievance and division would be wrong in any circumstances, but to do it when the family are expressly saying, please don't, is unforgivable. It shows exactly who he is.